Welcome back and to our dear guests. Last week and just before this conference takes place, UN envoy Ghassan Salama officially abandoned a Western plan to hold national elections on December 10th. As way out of conflict that raged in Libya. We have seen some different mercenaries coming to attack the oil fields in Libya that were held or controlled by Haftar forces. And we have seen some of them were being able to get in, have sort of control, and then Mr. Haftar was able to regain control on the area. It means that the situation is not really as stable as wished for. And hence, Mr. Ghassan Salama abandoned this plan to hold this next December 10th official elections. What is a suitable plan that will be put for the Libyans, for all the Libyans, to find consensus and come together in order to be able to really hold national elections which would see Libyan institutions functioning?
Madam, I think Ghassan Salama has abandoned his scheme for elections because he realized at the end that the situation is not ripe enough to hold the elections. So he attained this result and he abandoned his scheme for the short time. This is one thing. The other thing, unless the factions, all factions in the east, in the west, in the south, are convinced that they have interest to have a unified Libya, a unified country called Libya, as it was before under Gaddafi and under King Sunusi. The situation will continue in a chaos, in disturbances, and it will flood over all the neighboring countries, including Egypt. This is second point. The third point, I think, unless the international community, especially the United States, Russia, Italy, and France, and the neighboring countries, Algeria and Egypt, put some pressure.
Tunisia also.
Some pressure, great pressure on their lackeys or on their
tribes who they are
people,
acquainted with.
Yes. The Libyan who are very clear or very adjacent to their policies. I think unless the Libyans find it is for their interests and for the interests of Libya as a unified country to find a solution and to have elections, to have elected government, elected parliament, and unified armed forces. This is the most important thing, to have a unified armed forces, parliament, and unified government. Now this situation is unclear because Haftar is not controlling all Libya. He is controlling the east. The south is controlled by tribal forces and Qaeda and Daesh and some other infiltrators. The west is in the hands of Tripoli, supported by the United Nations and some major Western countries. So I think unless the Libyans themselves find it is imperative for them to sit down with each other and to find a peaceful solution to this situation in Libya. It will continue the situation will continue for sometime in the future. I can't see the end of it.
Right. And this is why during this conference, President Sisi stressed that all Libyans should take responsibility for implementing the political agreements. And hence he spoke about the importance of including all the political, security, economic aspects within the framework of dialogue. You're reading to that.
My reading to that is that the conflict actually in Libya could really be solved in a matter of months, maybe less. You know how?
Yes.
By cutting.
Please, how?
Yeah. And that's why I'm very, very optimistic by the meetings that took today. You cut the funding of money and arms, and everyone will sit on the table. When those who are funding, some groups there, will say, okay, we will stop funding with money, with materials, with the people who are fighting, and we will back off. I think things will change drastically. We have seen it in history, in the Al-Ta'if, in accords between the Lebanese factions, when Kingdom of Saudi Arabia stepped in with money and with dialogue, and everyone kept away. At that time, the Lebanese, it was the bloodiest of all conflicts. The Lebanese sat down and they said, okay, we'll talk. I think the same thing. And this is what we started achieving today when the Turks decided not to sit on the table.
Yes, but if I may just comment here and say that the Lebanese situation is totally different, because we're speaking about Lebanon are sects, plus Lebanese are business people.
Of course.
Right, but here is the situation in Libya is different. Libyan are not sects. It's not the problem of sectarian, it's not a sectarian problem, rather it is a tribal problem. And it is that each tribe has its own interest, and this is a grave problem.
Let me tell you, the sectarian problem is more grave. It's easier to have tribal problems than sectarians because you have no problems with religion. You know what I mean?
Problems,
yes. Tribal problems could be solved, but religious problems always are the most crucial and the most different. And I think that in Egypt we had the vision that we were stressing all the time, that the embargo should be lifted for the Khalifa Haftar, and then see what he could do. Then let's cut off all the branches financing terrorism, which is Qatar and Turkey. As a specialist, I have to say it. So when we stop all that, when we convince the French, when we convince the Italians that something has to be done, and the only thing that's bothering me in this meeting is one thing, is that the French didn't send, President Macron didn't come by himself. I think things should have been...
There was the World War, the 70s of the World War.
Of course, that's yesterday. They work 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Definitely, but yes,
course,
but it was a two-day summit, and the meeting was held... he had other meetings with Mr. Trump and other leaders.
They want to create a European army, and guess why? Because they think that something is wrong. Yes, and it is
opposed by Mr. Trump, by the way.
Yes, of course, because there is internal problem within the European Union, which is getting out of control because of illegal immigration, because of the decision of war that took place through NATO in 2011 against Libya.
Yes,
it's the same spiral of events. So I insist that the day when we fight the funding and the arms and the people who are working there, you will find the Libyans sitting and talking. Gaddafi did it before. When he overthrew Sanusi, he managed to gather them, all of them. Yes, with an iron fist, but anyway, he managed to do it.
More than an arm fist, by the way.
Of course, but the people stayed under his rule for 40 years.
Yes, indeed.
Yes,
indeed.
And the Europeans never bothered from any immigration at that time. So I think that now it's a crucial problem. It has something very, very urgent to be dealt with. I'm optimistic that the Russians are there. That we didn't mention in our discussion the efforts done by our brothers, the Emirates. They have done tremendous work in reconstruction in Benghazi with their funding of the development there. So I think that let's see that there's positive elements. Egypt, the guarantee, the citadel of security for this issue, and then we have our friends in the Emirates trying to find economic solutions for the Libyan people. And we have the dialogue with the Europeans. with the populist government in Italy. Let's not forget that the French, a few months ago, when they got some illegal immigrants and they wanted to push them back to Italy, the Italians closed the borders and they told them...
Yes, it was a spat between,
exactly.
between the Italians, the Spanish, and the French.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed.
So I think that it's very clear now that the Turks and the Qataris will have diminishing role as they have it now in the Middle East. They will have diminishing role also in Libya. The people who are honest and willing to work with hand in hand with our, let's say, neighbors in the northern Mediterranean, which is Egypt, we are working gladly with them. I think we have economic relations, excellent economic relations with the Italians as with the French. So I think that we are a good partner with them in the security and economically. Let's not forget also the question of Tunisia and the question of Algeria. Algeria
has a constitution that it does not interfere in the affairs of...
I know. We're not asking anyone. We didn't interfere. We didn't interfere. We're saying just let's do something. Well, we didn't interfere by the way that we are helping the people who are fighting terrorism.
Yes, definitely.
So I think that the Tunisians need to have calm beside at their borders. If not, things will get worse and worse and worse. So I think that the message is clear from the international community that Turkey now is out of the game, and what President Sisi had in mind since 2013 is to show that we are a reliable partner who could bring security in this region.
Definitely we are a reliable party. I mean here what we care for is the integrity of Libya and our national security, which is part and partial of our national security. So we have nothing else.
This is ABC international law. We're defending our security.
Yes, definitely. And I mean here, I mean that we are not eager for anything, or we don't want anything from Libya except this.
Exactly.
Look, to find our brothers in security, which also will bring up our security.
Also the less of the security. Look, for example, when Turkey felt threatened by the Kurdish factions in Syria, they went to Idlib and they took a part of Syria. We never did that in Libya.
We will never do.
And we will never do.
If we're speaking about the Libyans' will, then we have also to speak about the international community's will. And for years and years since the NATO got the no-fly zone and interrupted in the Libyan issue, and they carried out with their strikes, and the whole situation became chaotic, they never ended what they started. And the United Nations role has been sending envoys and envoys, but we haven't seen a real strong international community's will to resolve the situation in Libya. I'm not asking to assess, but rather, how do you find the international community's response towards crises, particularly in Libya and others, of course, in the Middle East as Syria?
Madam, the United Nations, or ICL, the United Nations is a weak organization. It is run by the United States and the superpowers. And if we find an agreement between the superpowers, it has happened in the past, and it is happening in the present, and that will continue in the future. Unless the superpowers find agreement, the United Nations is zero action. So I think unless the Western powers led by the United States and the other powers led by the Russia and all the other regional powers which allied beside Russia, unless they find themselves eager to find a solution in the Libyan crisis, I think the Libyan crisis will continue in the future. There are some players, I mean regional players, which are...
The existence of Russia this time, how do you find that?
I think Russia is trying to regain the reputation of the Soviet Union. They wants to have influence in the Middle East, as the late Soviet Union has put in Libya, because they exported weapons to Libya in mass quantities, and they gained so much money from Colonel Gaddafi and of Egypt, of Libya, of Iraq, of Syria. This is they exported weapons to all those countries, and they have set foot on the warm waters in the Mediterranean. They have some kind of base, naval base in Syria, I think in Latakia, and they wanted to have some kind of facilities in Marsa Matruh and in Libya as well. This is during the days of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
So I think Putin, who is a man of intelligence, and he served very well under the Soviet Union, I don't think he wants to regain the reputation of the Soviet Union, and he wants to bring up from Russia a superpower as it was in the Soviet Union.
Yes.
This is my
yes. It's so correct. But his existence, it's the first time that Russia really sends, and Sergei Lavrov is not some figure, some Russian figures. He is a very strong foreign minister.
Obviously, Medvedev is there.
Exactly.
He is a prime minister.
He is.
And he was the Russian ex-Russian president before Putin. They just exchanged the positions.
Anyway, so his existence, this time, for the very first time, to find a solution to Libya, does this give a kind of significance to how Russia is putting priorities to how it's working in the Middle East?
Every international power seeks its interests, as some of the English, I think Gladstone in the past and repeated by Churchill. England has no permanent enemies, has no permanent friends or foes. She has permanent interests. This is the principle in international relations. Every country seeks its interests, including Egypt, including Libya, including Syria. Every country is
not bad
looking after its interests.
Finding our national interest is not bad, as long as we're not aggressors, or we're not committing any aggression against anybody, and that's the difference. Unfortunately, our time is out. I have to end it here. Ambassador Samir Burhan, former Assistant Foreign Minister, and Dr. Cherif AMIIR, Professor of Political Science. We thank you both, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Tomorrow will be another important episode. So until tomorrow, it's good night.